Hello, this is Luis Alvarado, and I'm here to show you the progress we've made on our game dev project that we've been doing for the ACM Club. So this is a Unity 2D game. It's supposed to be a genre mashup of an RPG and a bullet hell, kind of trying to combine like the best of both worlds. This project is a team project, so to delegate all this work, we had to break down basically all the functions of the game and all like the basic things we needed for the game to function at it when it was done. And we came up with basically three systems: the player, the NPC, and the enemy. The player is obvious, you need a player in a video game. The NPC is for the story, and the enemy is for the bullet hell part of the game. From there, we broke it down even like further so we can understand what we needed for each of these systems to work. For the enemy and the player, they both needed to be able to move, take damage, and give damage. And for the NPC, it was a lot simpler because they didn't need to move. We just had to work on a dialogue system so we can talk to them and we can experience the story. Here for our player object, you can see that we have two main scripts right here. We have a player controller and a player stats. And that kind of covers the movement and then the damage. The player stats, obviously, they keep tracks of the damage. So we can adjust the UI to show that. So here you see we have a little bar that shows our health. And for the movement, it's a basic player controller that uses WASD movement. But we also have a dash that locks up all your movement and also locks up your ability to shoot, which we'll get to later. But with the health and the stats, you can see that we can take damage and then we can show it right here. We made the shooting system by creating a bunch of bullet objects that we spawn in a kind of a pool. You're going to be able to see right here. And as when we shoot, we create a lot of these bullets, and if they hit something or they go too far or they hit an enemy, they're cold. When they hit an enemy, they deal damage, and then you can see the damage right here in a UI similar to the players that kind of fades over time when we don't shoot the enemy for a while. Yep, and then it fades. And as you saw before, we also have an enemy, and that enemy has a much different shooting system, because enemies in bullet hells shoot a lot of bullets, and the method we used for the player does not really work when you're shooting that many bullets and trying to make a pattern that complex. And to deal with the problems with inefficiency, we instead use Unity's particle system, so that instead of spewing out like objects, it would spew out particles, which in Unity, they are a lot less resource intensive. And here we're going to see, just testing out, the types of patterns that an enemy can create with kind of a bunch of custom scripts we wrote for the enemies that they can call on to make a different pattern. See here, they stop to keep the pattern kind of unified, because if they start moving, the pattern will get like all wonky. And you can see here that you can dash through it and not take damage. The enemy also follows us around. We're going to get to that and like kind of thinking about the enemy movement later. You can see here they have these complex patterns, and they also can shoot like even more attacks, and all of this doesn't really hurt performance. And for the enemy movement, early on we were using a system that was just like having the enemy like follow the player, not really like considering what was in between them and the player. And they would just follow them and kind of stay a certain distance away. But that didn't work, especially with scenes like this where there's walls. The enemy would like be stuck right here, wouldn't do anything. So instead, we implemented a nav mesh system. The Unity nav mesh system is kind of wonky and hard to explain, especially since it's only supposed to work with 3D objects. So we have to use some third-party tools so that it would work with our 2D scene. But here you can see it. If I turn it on, you can see the mesh that exists for this scene, and it kind of shows where the enemy can go, and the enemy kind of uses this to be able to make a path between the location we set for it and where it currently is. We can even see the enemy form these paths as we are playing the game. I also want to show how the enemy avoids obstacles. So if we go up here where there's a bunch of cubes that are kind of blocking the enemy's way, and then we go to the scene, and we can see how the enemy is kind of making a bunch of paths towards the player. See, and then it stops its attack and it sees the path it's supposed to go, and it goes there. And then attacks. And last but not least, the final kind of system we had to work on for the game was the NPCs. And for the NPCs, they're basically just a sprite that you can talk to, so they aren't really as complicated as the rest of the game. For the dialogue system, we also implemented something called Ink. It's a plugin that you can put into Unity that allows you to use special ink files. These files that you can see here allow you to create dialogue trees that you can quickly implement into Unity, and it's very user-friendly for people who are new to Unity and need to make dialogue for the game. So here we can see dialogue for this NPC right here. You can see right here that we get a kind of a little thing we can use to test out our dialogue, right? But then we can enter the game, and we can go up to the enemy, interact with them. Now we're entering the dialogue, and you can see here we have two options. You want to kind of remember what this response is. I want you down, and then if we talk to them again and choose the other option, and then they tell us to die. The main problem we faced as a team was communication and organization. For a lot of people, this was the first time making a game or just making a game with a team. So they weren't really familiar with how to coordinate all this stuff. And I was a project lead that I don't have all that much experience leading projects like this. So we were kind of struggling to have everything organized and have communication between all these different groups that were working. So the artist and the story had problems with communication, and even some of the programmers were having problems communicating with other programmers so they could integrate the code they had written. So for me, one of the biggest lessons I took away from this was just learning how to keep people organized and help people talk to each other so that they can work together and they can integrate all of their code. And I think for a lot of my team members, it was a lot more about learning how to use these tools and just gaining more experience with game development. Now our plans for the future are to keep developing this game, actually bring in a bunch of the art assets our artists have been working on, and try to get it done by the end of November, so we can have a finished demo to show off for our club. That's the end of my presentation, so goodbye.